Graybridge City didn't rain politely. It didn't mist or sprinkle like it was asking permission. It came down like the sky had finally decided it was tired of holding everything up, and it wanted to drop it all at once. Headlights smeared across wet asphalt, streetlights wobbled in puddles like candle flames, the kind of night where you could lose your whole life in a single wrong lane change. Malcolm Hayes kept both hands on the wheel like he could physically hold his future in place. His suit jacket hung in the back seat inside a garment bag, zipped like a promise. The tie was already knotted, carefully, twice, then adjusted until it sat centered on his collarbone. His folder of notes rode, shotgun, crisp and organized, bullet points highlighted in calm colors that made his heart feel like it wasn't sprinting. But his heart was sprinting anyway. He'd been practicing answers for months, in the mirror, in the car, whispering them while he washed dishes late at night, when Ivy was asleep and the apartment was quiet enough that his fear could finally speak. Director of Operations, North Star Meridian Group. A title that didn't just mean money, it meant health insurance that didn't terrify him. It meant a fridge that wasn't a math problem. It meant Ivy growing up in a world where her father's love didn't have to compete with rent. His phone, mounted on the dash, glowed with the navigation route. 8 minutes. 7. He exhaled through his nose, careful not to let panic climb into his throat. He had learned to control that part. A long time ago, he had learned that people treated a black man's urgency like a threat, not a need. So he drove steady. He drove clean. He drove like he belonged on every road he touched. Then he saw her. At first it was only color, an impossible slash of red against a world made of gray water and black sky. A figure on the shoulder, bent slightly, one hand braced on the hood of a dead car. A red evening dress. Not a coat. Not a rain jacket. An evening dress that clung in places it shouldn't, soaked and heavy like it was trying to drag her down. Malcolm's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. Empty road behind him. His gaze snapped back. The car by the shoulder was angled wrong, hazard lights blinking weakly like tired eyelids. A wheel turned toward the ditch, steam drifted from under the hood and vanished into the downpour. And the woman, she lifted her head as his headlights washed over her face. Even through the sheet of rain, Malcolm saw it, the sharp line of shock in her posture, the way she tried to stand taller and failed. He saw her look down at her leg. He saw her hand come away wet and dark. Blood. His brain did what brains do in emergencies. It split the world into 2 doors. Door 1, keep driving, make the interview, save your daughter's future. Door 2, stop, help. Risk everything you've built. His phone chimed with a reminder he didn't need. Arrive early. Security check-in required. Malcolm's knuckles tightened on the wheel. He could feel the slick leather under his palms, the small tremor in his fingers that he hated. He imagined Ivy in the morning, sitting cross-legged on the rug with her cereal bowl, watching cartoons too loud because silence made her lonely. He imagined her asking, in that soft voice that always sounded like she was trying to be brave, "How did it go, Daddy?" He imagined having to say, "We're okay," when he wasn't sure. Then the woman's silhouette shifted, and she stumbled. Just one step, but wrong. Like the strength in her legs suddenly wasn't there. She grabbed the hood again, desperate, and Malcolm made a sound he didn't recognize as his own, a quiet, frustrated exhale, like a prayer that didn't know who it was for. The clock in the corner of his dash read 8:52. His interview was at 9 o'clock. The building was still 6 minutes away, and the rain was turning the streets into slow motion. Malcolm eased his foot onto the brake. The car slowed. The wipers fought hard, squeaking like they were arguing with fate. He signaled and pulled onto the shoulder, tires hissing through water, until he was behind the dead car with just enough distance to stay safe. His hazard lights blinked on. A heartbeat. A second. The woman turned, eyes wide, and for a moment Malcolm saw something that didn't match the dress. Not glamour, not drama. Fear, real fear, the kind that has no stage. He killed the engine, and then before he could talk himself out of it, he opened the door and stepped into the storm. The thing about a single-parent morning is that it's never just morning. It's a race with invisible opponents, time, money, fatigue, the ache in your bones from doing too much of everything. Malcolm's morning started at 6:10 because Ivy's school bus came at 7:20, and Ivy moved through time like time was a suggestion, not a rule. On the day of the interview, Malcolm had woken up before his alarm. The air was still dark. and the city outside the window had that quiet hum it got before it turned cruel. He'd stood in the kitchen, in socks, coffee brewing, and stared at his suit laid across the couch like a second body. The good suit. The one he'd bought off a coworker who didn't know it was his dream, folded into fabric. He'd heard Ivy's small feet pad out of her room, and then her voice, sleepy and certain. "Daddy?" "In here, Ivybug." She appeared in the doorway with her hair wild, cheeks puffed with sleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit by one ear like it had done something wrong. Malcolm smiled because he couldn't not. "Big day," he said. She rubbed her eyes. "Interview day?" "That's right." Ivy climbed into a chair at the tiny table and watched him pour cereal. She watched like she was studying him, like she knew the world could take people away if he didn't pay attention. Malcolm set the bowl down in front of her. Then he reached for the napkins. He always folded them in half first. Always. Edges meet, then breathe. It was a silly habit he'd picked up when Ivy was younger, and messy and constantly sticky. Folding the napkin made it thicker, made it feel more like a tool than a flimsy thing. Like he was prepared. Now Ivy did it too, copying him with careful fingers. She folded her napkin and nodded, serious. "So we're ready." Malcolm laughed softly. "So we're ready." He poured himself coffee and leaned on the counter. The apartment smelled like toast and cinnamon cereal and the hand lotion he put on every night because winter cracked his skin until it hurt. Ivy swung her legs under the chair. "What if you get the job?" Malcolm tried to keep his voice light. "Then we celebrate." "Like pancakes?" "Like pancakes," he promised. "And you can come to my class more?" That one hit him in the chest. Because it wasn't a complaint. It was a hope wrapped in a question. Malcolm walked over and crouched beside her chair. He smoothed her hair down, careful with the tangles. "I'm going to try," he said. "I'm trying now." Ivy's eyes held his. Big, brown, trusting. "Daddy," she said, like she was about to share a secret with the universe. "Remember what we always do?" Malcolm swallowed. "What's that?" "We do the right thing," she said. "Even when it's hard." He stared at her, and something inside him shifted, because he taught her that. He taught it like it was a shield. But he also taught it like it was a way to live, and he never told her how expensive it could be. Ivy reached into her backpack and pulled out a folded paper, creased and wrinkled like it had been handled 100 times. "I made you this," she said. Malcolm opened it carefully. A drawing in thick crayons. A stick figure man with a big smile. A small girl holding his hand. And above them, in wobbly letters, "My dad helps people." Malcolm's throat tightened so fast he almost coughed. He forced a smile because Ivy was watching. Always watching. "You're going to do great," she said. Malcolm pressed the drawing to his chest for half a second, where she couldn't see his face. Then he put it in his inside jacket pocket, right where his heart would sit behind it. "I'm going to try," he told her. And Ivy nodded like trying was the only thing that mattered. Later, when he walked her to the bus stop, the sky was already a dull slate color. Rain threatened at the edges. Ivy's hand was small and warm in his. Before the bus doors closed, Ivy leaned out the window. "Do the right thing," she called. People turned. A few smiled. Malcolm lifted his hand and waved, pretending his chest didn't ache. "I always do," he called back. And then the bus pulled away, and Malcolm stood there on the curb with the rain beginning to fall, wondering if promises were supposed to feel this heavy. By 8:30 p.m., Graybridge City was in full storm. Malcolm had parked 3 blocks from North Star Meridian Group because parking near the building cost more than he wanted to admit. He walked fast, head down, collar up, folder tucked under his arm like it was fragile. He'd checked his reflection in the car mirror twice. He'd practiced his opening line one last time. "Good morning. Thank you for meeting with me. I'm Malcolm Hayes, and I—" It sounded strong when he said it alone. It sounded like someone who belonged in glass buildings. North Star Meridian wasn't just a company, it was a landmark. One of those sleek towers that stabbed into the city's clouds, all reflective windows and clean angles. It made the older buildings around it look tired. Malcolm had stared at it from a distance for years, thinking, that's where the decisions get made. The people inside that building didn't worry about late fees. They didn't count coins on the kitchen counter. They didn't have to choose between a dentist appointment and groceries. He wanted to be one of the people who could choose peace. Not because he craved power, because he craved steadiness. In the weeks leading up to the interview, he'd cut every unnecessary expense. No takeout, no new clothes. He sold his old gaming console. He took extra shifts. He studied leadership frameworks at night until his eyes burned. He didn't tell anyone at work until he had to request the morning off. When his manager asked where he was going, Malcolm kept his voice neutral. Interview. With who? Malcolm hesitated. North Star Meridian. His manager's eyebrows had lifted in that way people lifted them when they were deciding whether to be impressed or suspicious. You aiming high, the manager said. Malcolm smiled politely. I'm aiming right. Now, in the rain, with his tie perfect and his breath controlled, he was 6 minutes from proving he could walk into that building and not shrink. His phone buzzed. A calendar alert. North Star Meridian Group, Director Role Interview, 9 a.m. Arrive early, no exceptions. Malcolm's fingers tightened around the folder. He could feel the paper edges. Sharp. Real. And then, on the highway ramp, the traffic slowed. Water pooled in dips of asphalt. Cars moved like cautious animals. He checked the clock. 8:51. His stomach dipped. Come on, he whispered, not to the cars, but to the universe. And that's when the universe answered with a red dress on the side of the road. The rain hit Malcolm's face like cold hands. It slid down his forehead, into his eyebrows, along the sides of his nose. It soaked the shoulders of his shirt in seconds. His shoes splashed in shallow water that looked harmless until you realized how quickly harmless could turn dangerous. He stepped carefully toward the dead car. The woman in the red dress looked like she'd walked out of a different world and gotten lost in this one. Her hair, dark, styled, was half fallen now, strands plastered to her cheeks. Mascara had smudged at the corners of her eyes, not in a dramatic way, but in the way people looked when they'd been crying without time to fix it. She gripped the hood with one hand. With the other, she pressed hard against her lower leg, just above the ankle. Blood seeped between her fingers. When Malcolm got close enough, he raised his hand slightly, showing he wasn't a threat. Years of being careful lived in his body like muscle memory. Hey, he called over the rain. Ma'am, are you hurt? Her gaze snapped to his face. Her eyes were sharp, green maybe, hard to tell in the storm. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat. My car, it just died, and She tried to straighten up. Her leg gave. She hissed in pain and grabbed the hood again. Malcolm moved in quickly, not touching her yet, just close enough to steady her if she fell. Okay, he said, voice low, calm. Okay. Don't move too fast. She laughed once, bitter and small. That's easy for you to say. Malcolm glanced down. The cut on her leg wasn't small. It wasn't catastrophic, but it was bad enough to keep bleeding in the rain, which meant it would keep bleeding until someone stopped it. He looked toward her car door. Did you call someone? My phone. She lifted it, and Malcolm saw her hand shaking. No service, or maybe I just... She stopped herself. Her jaw tightened. Malcolm saw the moment she decided not to plead. That moment, the pride clinging to her even while she stood there bleeding, hit him strangely, like looking in a mirror. He swallowed. What's your name? He asked. For a second she hesitated, like names were dangerous. Cass, she said finally. Cassandra. Malcolm nodded. I'm Malcolm. Another car drove by, tires spraying water. The driver didn't slow, didn't look. Cassandra's face flickered. Anger, humiliation, something like defeat. Then she blinked it away. Malcolm felt something hot rise behind his ribs. Not at Cassandra. At the world. At how easy it was for people to keep going when it wasn't their problem. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone, checking the time again like it might have changed out of sympathy. 8:53. 7 minutes. He could still make it if he left now, if he got back in his car, hit the gas, prayed the security check line wasn't long. He could still make it if he pretended he didn't see her. Cassandra's breath came in short bursts. Her fingers were white around her leg. Please, she said, and the word came out like it surprised her. Like she hated needing it. Just, if you can. Malcolm's mind flashed with Ivy's face at the bus window. Do the right thing. His jaw clenched. Okay, he said. We're getting you out of this rain. Cassandra blinked at him. What? Malcolm stepped back toward his car. There's a cafe up ahead, 2 blocks. We'll go there, get you warm, clean this up. I can't. She gestured helplessly at her car. My car! Your car can sit right where it is for 10 minutes, Malcolm said. Your leg can't. Cassandra stared at him like he'd just spoken a language she forgot existed. Malcolm opened his passenger door and pulled out the small first aid kit he kept in the glove compartment. It was cheap, plastic, and half empty, but it had what mattered: gauze, tape, antiseptic wipes. He turned back. Can you walk? He asked. Cassandra tried. Her face tightened. She barely put weight down. No, she admitted, and the word sounded like it cost her. Malcolm nodded once, like this was simple. I'm going to help you, he said. I'm going to put my arm around you. You tell me if anything hurts worse. Cassandra's eyes flicked over him, his dress shirt, his careful posture, the folder on the seat visible behind him. You're dressed for something, she said. Malcolm didn't answer right away. Then he gave a quiet, honest exhale. Interview, he said. Cassandra's brows lifted slightly. And you stopped. Malcolm looked at her leg again, then up at her face. I stopped, he said. He slid his arm around her back, keeping space, keeping it respectful. Cassandra leaned into him like she didn't want to but had no choice. Together, step by step, they moved toward the cafe lights down the street. The rain hammered them both, and behind them, Malcolm's car sat on the shoulder with its hazards blinking, counting down the seconds of a life he might have just thrown away. The cafe door chimed when Malcolm pushed it open with his shoulder. Warm air rushed out, smelling like espresso and sugar. A few people sat hunched over laptops, staring at screens like the weather wasn't trying to drown the city outside. Every head turned when Cassandra limped in, dripping rain, red dress clinging to her, blood on her hand. A barista's mouth opened. Whoa! Are you okay? A woman behind the counter asked. Malcolm guided Cassandra to a small table near the wall, away from the main flow. He pulled out a chair and helped her sit. Cassandra's breath shuddered as she lowered herself. I need towels, Malcolm said to the barista, and maybe hot water. And do you have napkins? A lot. The barista moved fast, suddenly awake. Yeah, I've got you. Malcolm shrugged out of his coat and draped it over the back of Cassandra's chair without asking, because he could see her shoulders shaking from cold. Thank you, Cassandra muttered, but her tone was complicated, not gratitude alone. Malcolm knelt beside the table and opened his first aid kit. He laid out what he had with quick, practiced motions. Cassandra watched him. You just carry that? Malcolm glanced up. I've got a kid. Something in Cassandra's expression softened. How old? 6. Cassandra's gaze drifted to the folder now sitting on the table, damp at the edges. And your interview? Malcolm didn't look at the folder. He didn't want to watch his future soaking through. He pulled napkins from the stack the barista placed down and, without thinking, folded 2 of them in half, edges meeting cleanly. Then he folded another. He pressed the folded napkins gently against Cassandra's cut to slow the bleeding while he tore open an antiseptic wipe. Cassandra flinched when the cold wipe touched her skin. Sorry, Malcolm said quietly. It'll sting. I've had worse, Cassandra said, but her voice wavered. Malcolm cleaned the wound carefully, not rushing, not pretending it was smaller than it was. The cut looked like something sharp had caught her, maybe a piece of metal when she stepped out, maybe she slipped and hit the edge of the door. Blood welled again. Malcolm's hand stayed steady anyway. A man at a nearby table glanced over, then looked away. A woman whispered something to her friend. Life continued like Cassandra wasn't sitting there broken open. Malcolm hated that, the casualness of other people's distance. He wrapped gauze around Cassandra's ankle and pressed it into place. He tore tape with his teeth and sealed the end, neat, snug, not too tight. Does that feel okay? He asked. Cassandra tested it, shifting her foot slightly. Yes. Her eyes stayed on him, studying, measuring. Malcolm sat back on his heels. Rain dripped from his hair onto the tile floor. He reached for another napkin and folded it automatically, wiping his hands, cleaning the blood off his fingers like it was normal. Cassandra's voice came softer. "Why did you stop?" Malcolm looked at her for a long moment. Then he shrugged, almost embarrassed by how simple it was. "Because you looked like you needed somebody," he said. Cassandra's mouth tightened. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have," Malcolm said. "You were hurt. I had supplies. That's it." She stared at him like she was trying to find the trick. "What did you lose?" she asked. Malcolm's eyes dropped to his phone. He didn't want to check, but he did anyway. 8:59, his interview. Right now. His stomach sank so deep it felt like it might scrape the floor. He swallowed. "I missed it," he said. Cassandra's eyes widened. For the first time, her composure cracked fully. "You missed..." She stopped, then started again. "You missed a job interview because of me?" Malcolm didn't blame her for the shock. He didn't blame her for the way disbelief sounded like accusation. He kept his voice steady. "I didn't miss it because of you," he said. "I missed it because I made a choice." Cassandra stared at him. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. "I didn't ask you to..." "I know," Malcolm said. A beat of silence filled the space between them, thick as the rain outside. Then Cassandra spoke again, quieter now. "What kind of interview was it?" Malcolm's lips pressed together. For a second he considered lying, making it smaller so it wouldn't hurt so much. But Ivy's drawing was in his pocket like a witness. "North Star Meridian," he said. Cassandra's face didn't change in any dramatic way. No sudden gasp, no movie reaction, but something moved behind her eyes, like a door shifting on its hinges. "That's big," she said. "It was," Malcolm replied. He didn't add, "It was everything." Cassandra stared down at her bandaged ankle. "I'm sorry," she said, and the words sounded like they had thorns. Malcolm shook his head once. "Don't be," Cassandra looked up sharply. "How can you say that?" Because it was already done, Malcolm thought. Because regret wouldn't pay the bills. Because if he let himself blame her, he'd become someone Ivy wouldn't recognize. He took a breath. "My daughter, she has this thing," he said. "We say it every day." Cassandra watched him closely. "We do the right thing," Malcolm said, "even when it's hard." Cassandra's eyes flickered. Something in her face tightened like she was holding back emotion she didn't want to admit she had. "And you think this was the right thing?" she said. Malcolm looked at the bandage. The blood stopped. The shaking in Cassandra's shoulders eased. "Yes," he said, "I do." The barista returned with a mug of hot water and a cloth towel. "On the house," she said quietly. Malcolm nodded in thanks. Cassandra wrapped her hands around the warm mug like it was an anchor. Outside, the rain kept hammering the windows, and Malcolm could feel the shape of his missed future sitting beside him at the table, silent and heavy. When Cassandra reached into her small clutch purse, Malcolm saw the ring. It wasn't flashy. No giant diamonds screaming for attention. It was a signet ring. Simple. Heavy. The kind of jewelry you wore because it meant something, not because it sparkled. A clean symbol was etched into it. A star shape, maybe. Or a compass. Malcolm couldn't tell. Not exactly. But it looked expensive in a way that didn't beg to be noticed. Cassandra pulled out her phone again and tapped the screen, jaw clenched. "No signal," she muttered. Malcolm glanced at the screen as she tilted it. For half a second, he saw a contact name before she swiped away. Board liaison. Elliot H. Cassandra's thumb hovered as if she debated calling anyway, even without service. Then she lowered the phone slowly. Her eyes met Malcolm's, and he realized she'd seen him see it. A subtle stiffness entered her posture. "What?" she asked. Malcolm held up a hand. "Nothing." Cassandra's lips pressed together. People always say nothing when they mean something. Malcolm's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Habit." "From where?" He could have said, from being watched, from being judged, from living in a world where every question had a hidden second question. Instead, he said, "From life." Cassandra studied him. Then her gaze moved to his hands. "You're good at that," she said, nodding toward the bandage. "I've had practice." "With your kid?" "Yeah," Malcolm said. "And with myself." Cassandra's brow furrowed slightly. "What does that mean?" Malcolm hesitated. He didn't like talking about his life to strangers. especially strangers with ring-shaped secrets and phone contacts labeled like corporate titles. But something about Cassandra's face, tired under the makeup, scared behind the pride, made him answer anyway. "My daughter's mom passed," he said simply. Cassandra's eyes widened a fraction. It's okay," Malcolm said quickly, before sympathy could turn into pity. "It was 2 years ago. We've been figuring it out." Cassandra nodded slowly, and for the first time since the roadside, her voice lost its edge. "That's hard," she said. Malcolm gave a small shrug that wasn't really a shrug. "It is what it is." Cassandra looked down at her hands, at the ring she'd tried not to show. "I'm not used to relying on strangers," she admitted. "Most people aren't," Malcolm said. Cassandra's laugh was quiet, humorless. "Most people don't end up bleeding in the rain in formal wear either." Malcolm looked at the red dress again, really looked at it. It wasn't the kind of thing you wore to a casual dinner. It was the kind of dress that belonged to galas, speeches, rooms with microphones. "You coming from an event?" he asked. Cassandra hesitated. "Something like that." Malcolm nodded, accepting the half answer. He didn't press. He wiped his hands again with a folded napkin, edges meeting, then breathed, and set it on the table. Cassandra's gaze followed the napkin like it mattered more than it should. "That folding thing," she said. "You do it every time." Malcolm blinked. "Yeah." "Why?" He looked at the napkin, then back at her. "It makes it stronger," he said. "Makes it feel ready." Cassandra's face softened in a way that startled him. "Ready," she repeated, almost to herself. The cafe door chimed again as another gust of rain-driven wind pushed someone inside. Cassandra flinched, reflexive. Malcolm noticed. "You got somewhere safe to go?" he asked. Cassandra's eyes shifted away. "Yes." The hesitation was small, but it was there. And Malcolm suddenly wondered if Cassandra's idea of safe had more to do with distance than comfort. He checked the time again, because he couldn't stop himself. 9:07. It was over. Whatever he could have saved by leaving early was gone. Cassandra noticed the glance. Her voice tightened. "You're angry," she said. Malcolm looked up. "No." "That's a lie." Malcolm stared at her, then gave a slow exhale. "I'm not angry at you," he said. "I'm angry at the timing, at the rain, at the way life stacks things on top of each other and asks you to pick one." Cassandra's eyes held his, and in that moment she looked less like a stranger in a dress and more like a person who knew what it meant to carry weight. "What do you want from me?" she asked suddenly. The question landed like a slap, sharp and defensive. Malcolm blinked. "What?" Cassandra's jaw tightened. "You help me, you miss your interview. What do you want? Money? A favor? A story?" Malcolm's first instinct was anger. Not because she asked, because the world taught her to ask it, because the world taught him to expect it. He leaned back slightly, making space between them again, keeping his voice controlled. "I don't want anything," Malcolm said. Cassandra's eyes narrowed. "Nobody does something for nothing." Malcolm's throat tightened. He thought of Ivy's drawing. "My dad helps people." He looked Cassandra dead in the eye. "Sometimes people do," he said. "Sometimes it's that simple." Cassandra stared at him like she didn't know whether to believe him, and then very slowly her shoulders lowered, like she was letting herself feel something she'd been holding back. "I don't know if I remember what simple feels like," she admitted. Malcolm didn't answer immediately, because the truth was, neither did he. But he said gently, "We can start with getting you home." Cassandra nodded once, small. And Malcolm reached for his phone, not to check the time this time, but to call a taxi. The taxi driver was an older man with tired eyes and a kind voice. He pulled up outside the cafe, windshield wipers working overtime. Malcolm guided Cassandra carefully, one step at a time, hand hovering near her elbow in case she slipped. The driver leaned over. "Everything okay?" "She needs to get home," Malcolm said. "Her legs bandaged, but she shouldn't walk much." The driver nodded. "Got it." Cassandra climbed into the back seat, dress gathered awkwardly, trying to keep dignity even in pain. Malcolm slid in beside her, giving space, keeping his body angled away so she didn't feel trapped. The taxi smelled like pine air freshener and wet wool. Cassandra stared out the window at Graybridge sliding by, blurred in rain. "You really missed it," she said quietly. Malcolm looked down at his hands. He was still holding a folded napkin, damp now, crumpled at the edges but folded nonetheless. "Yeah," he said. Cassandra's voice turned sharper again, like she needed it to survive. "That's insane." Malcolm gave a small, humorless laugh. "Maybe." Cassandra turned her head toward him. Streetlights flashed across her face in soft pulses. "Do you always do that?" she asked. "Throw yourself under the bus for strangers?" Malcolm's jaw flexed. "No," he said. I don't have the luxury to do that often." "That's the point," Cassandra said, frustration rising. "You don't have the luxury, and you did it anyway." Malcolm looked at her, and something in his expression must have answered because Cassandra's voice faltered. "I'm sorry," she said again, quieter. "I keep saying it like it helps." "It doesn't," Malcolm said gently. "But I get why you say it." The taxi turned onto a quieter street where the houses grew larger and the streetlights spaced farther apart. The kind of neighborhood Malcolm only drove through, never into. Cassandra's gaze fixed forward. "You know what's funny?" she said softly. Malcolm waited. "I've been in rooms full of people," Cassandra said. "Hundreds, smiling at me, listening to me, clapping when I speak." She swallowed. "And tonight, on that road, I've never felt more invisible." Malcolm's chest tightened. He didn't know what to say to that, because the world was full of invisibility, and most of it didn't come with a red dress. "I saw you," he said finally. Cassandra's eyes flicked toward him. Something like pain moved there. "I know," she whispered. The taxi pulled up in front of a building that looked like glass stacked on glass, private security lights glowing at the entrance. The driver whistled low under his breath. Cassandra didn't react. Malcolm's stomach dropped again. He looked at Cassandra, then at the building, then back at Cassandra. This wasn't just safe. This was money. This was power. Cassandra's jaw tightened as if she realized what Malcolm was realizing. She reached into her purse, pulled out cash, and leaned forward to pay the driver. Malcolm stopped her with a small motion. "I've got it." Cassandra turned sharply. "No." "I said I've got it," Malcolm replied, calm but firm. Cassandra stared at him. "Why?" Malcolm's voice lowered. "Because you're hurt. Because you don't need to owe me. Because I don't want you to feel like you're buying your way out of this." Cassandra's eyes flashed with something. Anger, shame, gratitude, all tangled. Malcolm handed the driver the fare and a tip big enough to make the man blink. "Take care," the driver said, nodding at Malcolm with a kind of respect that felt rare. Malcolm stepped out into the rain and walked around to open Cassandra's door. The building's awning covered part of the sidewalk, but the wind still blew rain sideways. Cassandra shifted, preparing to stand, jaw clenched. Malcolm glanced at her bare shoulders. "Wait." He reached into the taxi and grabbed his umbrella from the floor, the only umbrella he owned. It wasn't fancy. The handle was slightly crooked. The fabric had a small tear near one rib, but it worked. He opened it. Rain drummed on it instantly. Cassandra stared at the umbrella like it was a strange gift. "Here," Malcolm said. "Take it." Cassandra's eyes widened. "Malcolm, no, you need—" "I'll be fine," he said, and he meant it as much as he could. Cassandra's voice lowered, urgent. I already chose," Malcolm said simply. He handed her the umbrella. Their fingers brushed briefly, and Cassandra flinched like touch was unfamiliar in this kind of moment. She took it slowly. Then, before Malcolm could step back, Cassandra reached out and plucked something from the taxi seat. A folded napkin, the one he'd kept in his hand. She held it up, eyebrows raised. "You fold everything," she said softly. Malcolm almost smiled. "Habit." Cassandra's fingers tightened around the napkin. "I'm keeping this," she said. Malcolm blinked. "Why?" Cassandra looked away. Because it feels like proof." "Proof of what?" Cassandra's gaze returned to him, sharp and honest. "Proof that someone stopped," she said. Malcolm's throat tightened again. Cassandra adjusted her grip on the umbrella and took one careful step toward the building entrance. She paused and looked back. "Thank you," she said, and this time the words sounded clean. Not thorny, not defensive, just true. Malcolm nodded once, then Cassandra turned and disappeared into the bright lobby, the red dress swallowed by glass and light. Malcolm stood under the edge of the awning for a moment, rain misting his face, listening to the city breathe. Then he stepped out into the storm without the umbrella. The rain hit him full force, and as he walked back toward the street, his phone buzzed with a missed call notification from North Star's recruiter, too late to answer. Malcolm didn't stop walking, because stopping now wouldn't change anything. The walk back felt longer than it should have. Graybridge City was all reflections in rushing water, neon signs trembling in puddles, distant sirens muffled by the downpour. Malcolm's shirt clung to his skin, his hair dripped down his forehead. His shoes squelched with every step, each one reminding him how far he'd strayed from the clean, bright path he'd planned. He reached his car and sat behind the wheel without starting it. He didn't move for a long minute. His hands rested on the steering wheel like they belonged to someone else. Then he looked at his phone. The calendar alert had changed from upcoming to past. The location pin still sat on the North Star Tower like a silent accusation. Under it, one word, missed. Malcolm stared at it until his eyes burned. He tried to imagine walking into the interview soaked and late, apologizing, explaining, telling a room full of executives that he'd stopped because a stranger was bleeding in the rain. He could already hear the polite smiles, the subtle judgment, the unspoken question. Why did you let yourself get distracted? Malcolm leaned back and closed his eyes. Ivy's drawing pressed against his chest in his pocket. He could feel it there, crumpled slightly now, warmed by his body. My dad helps people. Malcolm swallowed hard. He started the car, and he drove home through the rain, not knowing yet that he'd just collided with a life far larger than his own. The next day, Graybridge City smelled like damp concrete. Rain had eased into a steady drizzle, but the sky stayed low and gray like it was waiting for something else to happen. Malcolm went through the motions. He took Ivy to school. He smiled at her teacher. He waved as Ivy ran into the building with her backpack bouncing. Then he sat in his car for a long time with the engine off, staring at the steering wheel as if answers could appear there. He called the North Star recruiter and left a voicemail. His voice was controlled, professional, calm. Hi, this is Malcolm Hayes. I had an interview scheduled yesterday morning. I'm calling to apologize for missing it due to an emergency. I understand if the opportunity is no longer available, but I would appreciate any chance to reschedule. Thank you for your time. He listened to his own message afterward and felt nothing. Because the truth was, he already knew the answer. North Star Meridian Group didn't reschedule Destiny interviews. That afternoon, Malcolm went to a diner near his apartment because he couldn't stand being in the quiet kitchen alone. The diner was warm and smelled like fried onions. The waitress knew him by face, not by name. He ordered coffee, black, cheap. A TV mounted in the corner played the local business news, the volume low. Malcolm wasn't watching at first. He was staring at his hands, at the way his fingernails were trimmed too short because stress made him cut them like he could cut worry away. Then a headline bar slid across the bottom of the screen. North Star Meridian Group, CEO returns to Graybridge after charity gala. Malcolm's eyes lifted slowly. The anchor spoke with that bright, polished tone people used when they talked about money like it was weather. And in other news, North Star Meridian Group's CEO, Cassandra Vale, made a surprise appearance this morning after last night's Meridian Foundation Gala, where she pledged a new initiative focused on ethical leadership. Malcolm's breath caught. The camera cut to footage, a woman stepping out of a car, cameras flashing, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, a tailored coat draped over her shoulders. But Malcolm recognized her anyway, not because of glamour, because of the eyes, because of the way she carried herself like she refused to be seen as weak, even when she was, because of the shape of her mouth when she pressed it tight, because Malcolm had held her up in the rain. His fingers went cold around the coffee mug. The diner noise faded into a distant hum. The anchor's voice continued. Vale has been praised for her focus on integrity and corporate culture, calling it the only currency that doesn't depreciate. Malcolm's stomach twisted. He stared at the screen, watching Cassandra smile for cameras, watching her nod at reporters, watching her move through the world like nothing could touch her. And his mind replayed her voice from the taxi. I've never felt more invisible. Malcolm's pulse thudded in his ears. He set the coffee mug down carefully because his hands were shaking, and he didn't want anyone to see. So the woman he'd helped, so the woman he'd bandaged and carried and given his umbrella to, she wasn't just anyone. She was the top. She was the person his interview panel would have answered to. Malcolm sat there, stunned, as if the universe had leaned close and whispered, "You think this was about a job?" He left the diner without finishing his coffee, and as he stepped back into the drizzle, he realized something else too. If Cassandra Vale was the CEO, then she knew his name, and that meant one of two things. Either she would forget him completely, or she wouldn't. 3 days can feel like a lifetime when you're counting hours like dollars. Malcolm did what he always did when life shoved him into a corner. He moved, he made lists, he searched job boards until his eyes blurred. He rewrote his resume in 3 different formats. He sent emails that were polite and hungry at the same time. He reached out to old contacts, swallowed pride, asked for leads. Most replies came back with versions of the same thing. "We'll keep your information on file. We went with someone else. We're looking for a different fit at this time." He didn't tell Ivy anything. At night, he cooked dinner like normal. He helped with homework. He laughed at her jokes. He watched cartoons with her and pretended the sound of his own worry wasn't louder than the TV. But worry has a way of showing up in the smallest places. It shows up in the way you stare too long at the price tags in the grocery aisle. It shows up in the way you pause before opening mail. It shows up when your landlord's reminder slips under the door, printed in tidy fonts that don't care who you are. Malcolm read the reminder twice, then folded it and slid it into a drawer so Ivy wouldn't see. On the 3rd day, Ivy came home from school quieter than usual. She hung her backpack on the hook and walked into the kitchen where Malcolm was chopping vegetables with too much focus. She stood there for a moment watching him. Then she asked carefully, "Daddy?" Malcolm kept chopping. "Yeah, Ivybug?" "Did you get the job?" she asked. The knife paused. Malcolm set it down slowly. He turned and leaned back against the counter, keeping his face neutral, keeping his voice gentle. "No," he said, "I didn't." Ivy's brows pulled together. "Because you were late?" Malcolm hesitated. "Because I didn't go." Ivy stared. "You didn't go?" Malcolm's stomach tightened. He nodded. Ivy's voice dropped to a whisper, like the apartment itself might judge him. "Why?" Malcolm crouched so he was eye level with her. He reached for her hands, small, warm. "Because I had to help someone," he said. Ivy's eyes widened. Like someone fell?" "Like someone was hurt," Malcolm said. Ivy's gaze searched his face, trying to understand the shape of the world. "Did you help them?" she asked. "Yes," Malcolm said. "I did." Ivy's mouth opened, then closed again. She looked down at her own hands. Then she asked the question that cracked something in Malcolm's chest. "Did doing the right thing break us?" Malcolm's throat tightened so hard it felt like he couldn't breathe. He pulled Ivy into a hug, firm and close, the way you hold on to something when you're afraid it might disappear. "No," he said into her hair. "No, baby, it didn't break us." Ivy's voice was muffled against his shirt. "But you look sad." Malcolm closed his eyes. He was sad. He was scared. He was tired. But he didn't want Ivy to learn that goodness was a trap. He loosened the hug and looked at her face. "I'm sad because I wanted that job," he said honestly. "I wanted it for us." Ivy nodded slowly, like she could feel the weight even if she didn't know the numbers. "But," Malcolm continued, "I'm not sad I helped." Ivy's eyes held his. "Even if it cost you?" Malcolm swallowed. "Even if it cost me," he said. Ivy stared for a long moment, then nodded with the solemnity of someone making a vow. "Okay," she said softly. "Then we'll be okay." Malcolm tried to smile, came out shaky. And that night, after Ivy fell asleep, Malcolm sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, job listings glowing, and he let himself feel the fear he'd been hiding. He rested his forehead against his knuckles. He whispered into the quiet apartment, "Please." Not to a god, not to fate, just to the empty air. Please let the right thing not ruin us. The next afternoon, Ivy came home with a scraped knee. It wasn't serious. A playground fall, the kind of thing kids shake off with a quick cry and a faster return to running. But Ivy walked into the apartment with her lip trembling, holding her knee like it was the most important wound in the world. Malcolm's heart jumped anyway. He sat her on the couch and pulled out the first aid kit. The same cheap plastic kit, now even emptier. He cleaned the scrape gently, Ivy wincing and huffing, dramatic in the way children are when they know they're safe enough to be dramatic. "You're okay," Malcolm murmured. "You're tough." "I'm tough," Ivy echoed, voice small. Malcolm tore open a small gauze pad and held it up. "Want to do it?" he asked. Ivy blinked. "Me?" "Yeah," Malcolm said. "I'll help." He showed her the gauze, how to fold it neatly. "Edges meet," he said, and Ivy's fingers copied his, careful. "Then breathe," Ivy whispered like it was a magic spell. Malcolm smiled despite the knot in his chest. She pressed the folded gauze gently against her knee. Malcolm wrapped tape around it with quick, neat motions. Ivy stared at the bandage like she'd built it herself. "See?" Malcolm said. "Ready?" Ivy nodded slowly. Then she looked up at him, face serious again. "Daddy?" she said. "Did the hurt lady, did she get better?" Malcolm froze. His mind flashed with red fabric, rain, blood, Cassandra's green eyes. "I think so," he said carefully. "I got her somewhere safe." "Nan lasai," Ivy's brows furrowed. "Did she say thank you?" "She did." Ivy nodded like that mattered. Then she said, "If someone helps you, you should help them back." Malcolm's stomach tightened because the world didn't always work that way. He kept his voice gentle. "Sometimes." Ivy tilted her head. "But you helped her even when it was hard." Malcolm nodded. "Yeah." Ivy leaned closer and lowered her voice like she was telling him a secret. "Maybe," she said, "the world saw you." Malcolm's breath caught. Because that was the thing, wasn't it? He had helped as if nobody was watching, but Ivy was always watching. And maybe that was enough. Malcolm kissed the top of her head. "We'll be okay," he said. And Ivy, with her knee bandaged and her heart stubborn, smiled. The call came the next morning. Malcolm was in the kitchen, rinsing a mug, when his phone buzzed on the counter. No caller ID. He stared at it for half a second, the way you stare at a knock on the door when you're not expecting anyone. Then he answered. "Hello?" A calm voice on the other end. Female. Controlled. Familiar in a way that made Malcolm's spine straighten. "Is this Malcolm Hayes?" His throat went dry. "Yes." A brief pause. Not awkward. Intentional. "This is Cassandra Vale." Malcolm's hand tightened around the phone so hard his knuckles ached. The kitchen seemed to tilt, like the world was shifting under his feet. He didn't speak right away because what could he say? You were bleeding in the rain. You were a stranger. You were the CEO of the company that could have saved us. Cassandra's voice remained steady. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time," she said. Malcolm swallowed. "No." Another pause. "I've been trying to decide how to say this," Cassandra said, "and I've realized there isn't a version that's neat." Malcolm leaned back against the counter. His pulse thudded hard. "What do you need?" he asked quietly. Cassandra inhaled, and for a fraction of a second Malcolm heard something human underneath the polish. "I owe you an apology," she said. "For what happened, for the position I put you in without meaning to." Malcolm's jaw clenched. "You didn't—" "I know," Cassandra cut in, and there was steel in her voice now. "I know you chose. I'm not taking that away from you, but I'm acknowledging the cost." Malcolm stared at the faucet dripping slowly into the sink. "Okay," he said. Cassandra's voice softened again. "I also owe you a conversation." Malcolm's stomach tightened. "About what?" he asked. Cassandra let the silence stretch just long enough to make his breath shallow. "About your interview," she said. Malcolm's heart lurched. He forced his voice to stay even. "It's done." "No," Cassandra said simply. "It isn't." Malcolm closed his eyes. He could see her in the taxi, rain on her cheeks, pride fighting fear. He could see the news footage of her smiling for cameras like pain was a rumor. "What are you saying?" Malcolm asked. Cassandra's voice became very quiet, very precise. "I'm saying that night," she said, "you were interviewing." Malcolm's eyes opened. He stared at the wall as if it might crack and show him the answer. Cassandra continued. "I've built a company on performance," she said. "On numbers, on strategy. And all of that matters." Her voice tightened. But I've also watched people with perfect resumes make decisions that rot everything from the inside out. Malcolm's throat tightened. Cassandra's next words landed heavy. When I was on that road, she said, I felt abandoned, injured, invisible. She swallowed. Malcolm could hear it. And you, she said, didn't hesitate. Malcolm's fingers went numb around the phone. I did hesitate, he said quietly. I didn't keep driving. Cassandra exhaled. That's the point. Silence filled the line. Then Cassandra spoke again, clear. I want you to come to North Star, she said. Today, if you can. Malcolm's breath caught. His mind raced. Security gates, glass elevators, rooms with people who would look at him and decide whether he belonged. What for? He asked, though he already felt the answer blooming like heat in his chest. Cassandra's voice turned firm. To talk, she said, and to correct something. Malcolm stared at the kitchen table where Ivy's crayons were scattered, the small chaos of their life. Cassandra, he said carefully, I'm a father. I know, Cassandra said. And that's part of why I'm calling. Malcolm's throat tightened. He took a breath that felt like stepping off a ledge. Okay, he said. I'll come. Good, Cassandra replied. I'll have security expect you. Then, before she hung up, Cassandra added one more thing, softer than everything else. And Malcolm? Yes? I kept the folded napkin, she said. I don't know why, I just did. Malcolm's chest tightened. Okay, he whispered. Cassandra's voice almost trembled. Thank you, she said, and then the line went dead. Malcolm stood in the kitchen with the phone still in his hand, rain tapping the window gently like a reminder. For the first time in days, the air felt different, not lighter, but alive. And Malcolm realized something that made his stomach flip. He wasn't walking into an interview. He was walking into a consequence. North Star Meridian Group looked even taller up close, glass and steel rising into a sky the color of wet paper. The lobby was bright and clean in a way that made Malcolm suddenly aware of every drop of rain on his coat. He'd changed clothes. He'd put on his good suit again. He'd checked his tie 3 times, but his hands still felt unsteady. A security guard at the front desk glanced up as Malcolm approached. Name? Malcolm Hayes, Malcolm said, voice steady. The guard's expression shifted instantly. Not warmer, not friendlier, just official. Right, the guard said. Ms. Vale is expecting you. Elevator bank C. Top floor. Malcolm nodded, forcing himself not to show surprise. He walked across the lobby floor that shone like it had never known dirt. He stepped into the elevator, alone, and watched the numbers climb. Each ding felt like a heartbeat. When the doors opened, the top floor was quieter, carpeted, soft lighting, the smell of something expensive, wood polish, citrus, calm. A receptionist looked up and smiled politely. Mr. Hayes, she said, she's ready for you. Malcolm followed her down a hallway lined with framed photos, awards, headlines, group shots of people in suits smiling like nothing could touch them. He stopped in front of a door that looked heavier than it needed to be. The receptionist knocked once and opened it. Cassandra Vale stood by the window, looking out at Grey Bridge City like she owned every raindrop. She was wearing a simple black suit now. No red dress, no glamour, just clean lines and control. But when she turned, Malcolm saw the same eyes. She walked toward him, calm, measured, and held out her hand. Malcolm hesitated for half a second, then shook it. Her handshake was firm, warm. Malcolm, Cassandra said, thank you for coming. He nodded. You said you wanted to talk. Cassandra gestured to a chair near a low table. Sit, she said. Malcolm sat, back straight, hands clasped loosely. He could feel the old instinct to make himself smaller and refused it. Cassandra took the opposite chair. She didn't sit behind a desk. That mattered. For a moment, she simply looked at him, not like a CEO looking at a candidate, like a person looking at the one who saw her at her worst. I owe you clarity, Cassandra said finally. Malcolm's jaw tightened. I'm listening. Cassandra took a slow breath. That night, she said, I left an event. A gala. The Meridian Foundation. Malcolm nodded once, keeping his face neutral. My driver had an emergency, Cassandra continued. I insisted on driving myself. Stupid, in hindsight. She paused, eyes flickering with irritation at her own choice. My car hit debris, she said. A piece of metal from a construction site. I didn't see it until it was too late. The tire shredded. I pulled over. Malcolm listened, watching her hands. They were still, controlled. I stepped out, Cassandra said, and I slipped. The door edge caught my leg. Her voice tightened slightly. I called, she said. I tried to reach people, my assistant, security, anyone. Cassandra's eyes held Malcolm's. And for 10 minutes, she said, no one answered. Malcolm's chest tightened. Cassandra leaned forward slightly. You know what's funny? She asked, echoing her own words from the taxi like a ghost. Malcolm didn't answer. Cassandra continued anyway. I run a company that preaches ethics, she said. We have workshops, mission statements, posters in hallways about integrity. Her mouth tightened. And yet, in the moment when I was alone and bleeding, the people paid to protect me weren't there. Malcolm's jaw clenched. Cassandra's voice lowered. I felt invisible, she admitted. Not because nobody could see me, but because nobody chose to. Malcolm's throat tightened. Cassandra sat back slightly, eyes steady. Then you pulled over? She said. Malcolm held her gaze. I did. Cassandra's expression shifted, something like gratitude, something like grief. You didn't know who I was, she said. No, Malcolm replied. You didn't know what I could offer you, Cassandra said. No. You didn't know I was... Cassandra stopped herself, then continued smoothly. You didn't know anything. Malcolm's hands tightened together slightly. Cassandra nodded once, like she was confirming a fact. And you still stopped, she said. Silence. Cassandra reached into a folder on the table beside her chair and slid it toward him. Malcolm looked down. It was a printed document with North Star's logo at the top, an offer letter. His name typed neatly in bold. Malcolm's breath caught. He didn't touch it yet. He looked up at Cassandra, suspicion and hope wrestling in his chest. What is this? He asked. Cassandra's voice was calm. It's what you came for. Malcolm's throat tightened. You're offering me the director role. Yes, Cassandra said. Malcolm stared at her. Without an interview. Cassandra's eyes didn't flinch. You had one, she said quietly. Malcolm's pulse hammered. He felt dizzy, like the room had shifted slightly off its axis. Cassandra leaned forward. I can teach people strategy, she said. I can train skills. I can hire competence. Her voice turned hard as steel. But character, she said, is what people show when they believe no one is watching. Malcolm swallowed. Cassandra held his gaze. You showed me who you are, she said. And I believe North Star needs that more than it needs another polished resume. Malcolm's fingers twitched toward the offer letter, then stopped, because his mind flashed to Ivy, to school pickup lines, to bedtime stories, to the reality of being the only parent in a world that assumed someone else would show up. He looked at Cassandra, voice careful. Voice. Can I ask you something? Malcolm said. Cassandra nodded. Of course. Malcolm's voice dropped, steady and serious. Can I be a father first, he asked, and still belong here? Cassandra stared at him for a long moment. Then, instead of answering like a CEO, she answered like someone who'd bled in the rain. Yes, she said. And if this company can't make space for that, then it doesn't deserve you. Malcolm's chest tightened. Cassandra's gaze softened slightly. I'm not offering you charity, she said. I'm offering you responsibility. Malcolm nodded slowly. He finally pulled the offer letter closer and read the first lines, eyes scanning like he didn't trust the words to stay. Salary, benefits, start date. The numbers looked unreal. His throat tightened anyway, not because of money, but because of what it meant. A door opening. A chance. But he didn't miss Cassandra's next words. There's one more thing, she said. Malcolm looked up. Cassandra reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded napkin, clean now, dry, edges still perfectly aligned. Malcolm stared. Cassandra set it on the table between them like it was evidence in a case. I kept it, she said, because it reminded me of the moment someone stopped being a bystander. Malcolm's voice was barely audible. It was just a napkin. Cassandra shook her head once. No, she said. It was a choice. Malcolm stared at the napkin, then back at Cassandra, And suddenly, the rain outside the tower windows looked different. Not like a punishment, like a chapter turning. Malcolm didn't sign the offer letter right away, not because he didn't want it, because he needed to be sure it wasn't a dream that would evaporate when he blinked. He read it twice, then again. Cassandra watched him without impatience. Finally, Malcolm set the papers down and looked at her. "I need to be honest," he said. Cassandra's gaze stayed steady. "Please." Malcolm took a slow breath. "That morning," he said, "I had everything mapped out. I had my tie knotted before I even left the apartment. I had my answers rehearsed." A small, bitter smile flickered across his mouth. "And then I saw you," he said, "and my brain did math." Cassandra's eyes narrowed slightly, listening. "Time. Cost. Risk," Malcolm said. And then my daughter's voice showed up like she was sitting in the passenger seat. Cassandra's expression softened. Malcolm's throat tightened. "I didn't stop because I'm some kind of hero," he said. "I stopped because I couldn't imagine going home and looking at her if I didn't." Cassandra nodded slowly. "That's still character." Malcolm's voice grew firmer. "But I also need you to understand what it means for me," he said, "to miss a chance like that." Cassandra's eyes flickered with awareness. "For some people," Malcolm continued, "missing one interview is inconvenient. For me, it's rent. It's my kid's school. It's the difference between breathing and drowning." Cassandra held his gaze. Her voice was quiet. "I do understand," she said. "More than you think." Malcolm wasn't sure if he believed that, but he believed she meant it. Cassandra leaned forward slightly. "I built my career on proving myself," she said, "on walking into rooms where people assumed I was there because of my name, not because of my work." Malcolm's brow lifted slightly. Cassandra's mouth tightened in a way that suggested old anger. "I know what it is," she said, "to be measured before you speak." Malcolm held her gaze. He didn't say it, but he felt the truth of it in his bones. Cassandra tapped the offer letter lightly. "I'm not asking you to thank me," she said. "I'm asking you to take the job and bring that integrity into this building." Malcolm's jaw tightened. "And I'm asking you," he said, "to let me be a father while I do it." Cassandra nodded once, decisive. "We'll build that into your terms," she said. "If you need flexibility for school pickup, we plan for it. If you need boundaries, we set them." Malcolm stared, stunned by how direct she was. Cassandra's voice lowered. "I didn't have anyone stop for me," she said. Not really. Not until you did." She glanced at the folded napkin again. "I'm not going to punish you for your humanity," she said. "I'm going to reward it, and I'm going to protect it." Malcolm's throat tightened. He reached for the pen on the table. His hand hovered. Then he paused, looking at Cassandra. "One more question," he said. Cassandra nodded. "Why me?" Malcolm asked. "Out of all the candidates, why hand this to a man who didn't even show up?" Cassandra's answer came without hesitation. "Because," she said, "the people who always show up for power are easy to find." Her eyes locked on his. "The people who show up for a stranger in the rain," she said, "are rare." Malcolm's chest tightened like he'd been punched. He looked down. He signed. His name flowed onto the page in ink that felt too small for what it meant. When he finished, he set the pen down carefully. Cassandra's shoulders lowered slightly, like she'd been holding her breath too. "Welcome to North Star," she said. Malcolm exhaled, slow. "Thank you," he replied, and the words felt strange. Not because he didn't mean them, because he didn't know how to hold something good without waiting for it to be taken. Cassandra stood. Malcolm stood too, mirroring. Cassandra extended her hand again. This time Malcolm shook it without hesitation. As they released, Cassandra added quietly, "I'll have my assistant coordinate your onboarding, and—" She hesitated. "And I'd like to meet Ivy," Cassandra said. "If you ever feel comfortable with that." Malcolm blinked. "Why?" Cassandra's mouth softened. "Because," she said, "she taught you how to stop." Malcolm's throat tightened. He nodded once, unable to speak for a second. Then he said softly, "Maybe." And Cassandra, CEO of a company built on numbers, smiled like a person who'd just found something priceless. 2 days later, Malcolm came home to find a long box leaning against his apartment door. No flashy branding, just clean packaging and a small label with his name. He carried it inside like it might be fragile. Ivy ran out of her room, rabbit in hand. "What is it?" Malcolm set the box on the kitchen table and opened it carefully. Inside was his umbrella, the same crooked handle, the same small tear near one rib. But it had been repaired, stitched neatly, reinforced, the tear now a faint scar instead of a weakness. Tucked beside it was a note on thick paper. Malcolm unfolded it. Ivy leaned close, trying to read. Malcolm read aloud. "Mr. Hayes, you gave me your only umbrella. I'm returning it with gratitude and a promise. At North Star, the people who stop will not be left standing in the rain alone. Cassandra Vale." Malcolm's throat tightened. Then he saw the second thing in the box, a folded napkin. Not the same napkin, because that one would have disintegrated by now, but folded the exact same way. Edges meet, then breathe. And on the inside, in neat handwriting, a single line. "Thank you for seeing me." Malcolm stared at it for a long moment. Ivy's voice was small. "Daddy?" Malcolm blinked and looked down at her. She pointed at the napkin. "You fold like that." Malcolm swallowed. "Yeah." Ivy's eyes widened slowly, understanding dawning like sunrise. "That lady, the hurt lady," Ivy whispered. "She remembered you." Malcolm's chest tightened. "She did," he said softly. Ivy grinned suddenly, bright and triumphant. "I told you," she said. "The world saw you." Malcolm laughed, but it came out shaky. He knelt and pulled Ivy into a hug. He held her close. And in that small kitchen, with repaired umbrella and folded napkin on the table, Malcolm realized something he'd never let himself believe fully before. Maybe doing the right thing didn't guarantee a reward. But it did something else. It made you someone you could live with. And sometimes the world answered back. On Malcolm's first official day at North Star, the rain stopped. Not completely. Graybridge City never stopped raining completely, but the sky broke open enough to let pale sunlight spill onto the streets, turning puddles into mirrors. Malcolm wore his suit and carried his folder, but this time he didn't feel like a visitor. He felt like a man walking into a room he'd earned. Twice. When he picked Ivy up from school that afternoon, she came running out with her backpack bouncing, cheeks flushed from playing. She skidded to a stop in front of him. "Daddy," she said, "did you do your first day?" Malcolm smiled. "I did." Ivy grabbed his hand, squeezing. "Did you meet the office people?" "I met a lot of people," Malcolm said. Ivy's eyes were sparkling with questions. "Did you do good?" Malcolm crouched down, eye level. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Ivy's old drawing, now worn at the folds. "My dad helps people." "I did my best," Malcolm said. Ivy nodded solemnly. "That's the most important." Malcolm's throat tightened. He stood and took her hand. As they walked down the sidewalk, Ivy looked up at him and asked, "Daddy?" "Yeah?" "Are we okay now?" she asked. Malcolm squeezed her hand gently. "Yes," he said. "We're okay." Ivy smiled. "So we can get pancakes?" Malcolm laughed. "Yes, we can get pancakes." They reached a crosswalk. Ivy hopped on the white paint lines like they were stepping stones over lava. Malcolm watched her, heart full and aching at the same time. Because he understood something now, something he wanted Ivy to carry with her like armor that didn't make her hard. "Hey," Malcolm said, stopping her for a moment. Ivy looked up. "What?" Malcolm's voice was quiet, steady. "Sometimes," he said, "people see who you really are when you think no one's watching." Ivy's brows furrowed slightly. "Like a secret?" Malcolm smiled. "Like the truest kind of secret," he said. Ivy thought about that, then nodded like she accepted mysteries as part of life. They kept walking. Behind them, Graybridge City shimmered in leftover wetness. Ahead of them, the evening smelled like possibility. And Malcolm Hayes, father, leader, a man who stopped in the rain, realized that sometimes when you think you've lost everything by doing the right thing, you've actually won more than you knew how to ask for.